Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy. Tonight we climb into the slow, creaking world of a covered wagon as winter settles across the endless frontier. The air already carries the sharp bite of frost. The grass whispers beneath wooden wheels, and every breath turns into a little drifting cloud that vanishes before your eyes. You pull your coat tighter, glance across the rolling prairie, and quietly wonder whether that distant line of trees will offer shelter before darkness arrives. It probably will, or perhaps it won't. After all, this is one of those adventures where you probably won't survive this if luck refuses to cooperate. Thankfully, tonight your only real challenge is staying awake long enough to imagine it all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let everyone know your location and local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, and let your breathing slow as you step into another century. The wagon waiting before you is not quite the gleaming symbol of adventure that paintings often suggest. Up close, it smells of seasoned oak, worn leather, damp canvas, animal sweat, and just the faintest trace of flour dust escaping from tightly packed barrels. Every board has its own tiny crack. Every iron fitting carries scratches earned from hundreds of rough miles. You reach out and rest your hand against the curved wooden frame supporting the white canvas cover. It feels surprisingly rough beneath your fingertips. Someone stitched patches across several worn places where storms had tested the fabric. Even the strongest wagon eventually tells stories through repairs. A family's already preparing for another day on the trail. The father checks the harnesses with practiced movements, quietly running gloved hands along leather straps. The mother adjusts a stack of blankets tucked carefully inside the wagon. Two children chase each other for a few moments before being gently reminded that there is work to do. Even the youngest understands that every pair of hands matters. You climb aboard. Although climb may be giving the experience too much dignity, it is more of a careful shuffle between tightly packed belongings, trying very hard not to knock over something important, which, considering almost everything here is important, becomes quite the balancing act. Space disappears almost immediately. A few wooden chests contain clothing. Flour rests beside sacks of beans. A cast iron pot nestles between tools wrapped in cloth to stop them rattling with every bump. A treasured family Bible sits carefully protected inside a small wooden box. Nearby lies a handmade quilt carrying years of patient stitching. There is remarkably little room left for actual people. Modern moving vans encourage you to bring an extra chair because, well, why not? A pioneer wagon politely suggests that if you truly love that chair, perhaps you should marry it, because there certainly isn't space for both of you. The famous covered wagon, often associated with westward migration, became an icon of 19th century America. Thousands of emigrant families travelled along routes such as the Oregon Trail during the 1840s and 1850s, hoping to build new lives farther west. The wagons themselves were usually much lighter than many people imagine, designed to carry supplies rather than serve as comfortable homes. Sleeping inside them was often reserved for children, older adults, or those who were ill, while many travellers walked beside the wagon for much of the journey. That little detail surprises many people. Movies love showing everyone riding comfortably all day. Reality quietly shakes its head. The oxen appreciate lighter loads, and so do the fragile wooden wheels. The morning begins with simple sounds. Leather creaks. Metal buckles click together. Oxen snort soft clouds into the cold air. Someone stirs yesterday's ashes, searching for enough warmth to coax breakfast into existence. A kettle begins to steam. You notice how conversation stays gentle. Nobody wastes energy speaking loudly unless necessary. Voices carry across open country, but so does exhaustion. There is a peaceful rhythm to ordinary tasks that almost feels familiar despite the unusual surroundings, as sunlight climbs a little higher. Frost glitters across the prairie grasses like scattered crystals. Every blade catches the light for only a moment before slowly surrendering to the day's weak warmth. You begin walking alongside the wagon. The ground feels firm beneath your boots, although patches of frozen mud remind you that yesterday's puddles have become today's slippery surprises. The wagon rolls behind patient oxen whose steady pace rarely changes. They neither hurry nor complain, they simply continue. There is something strangely comforting about that. Some historians have compared the daily rhythm of wagon travel to the slow ticking of an enormous clock. Every sunrise brings harnessing animals. Every midday brings brief rest. Every sunset demands another camp. Days blend together until weeks quietly pass. Not every belief carried west rested on firm evidence. However, one curious frontier tale claimed that placing certain herbs beneath wagon seats could discourage bad luck from following the family during difficult crossings. Whether anyone truly believed this or simply enjoyed the comforting ritual is impossible to know. But such little customs often helped people feel a sense of control when so much remained uncertain. Historians still argue whether optimism or desperation served as the stronger motivation for most emigrants leaving established communities behind. Personal diaries reveal both emotions living side by side. One family might dream excitedly about fertile farmland, another simply hoped to escape debt or hardship. Most probably carried a mixture of hope, fear, ambition, and quiet determination. As afternoon approaches, the wind begins changing. It slips beneath your coat collar with surprising confidence. Winter is announcing itself. The family notices immediately. Blankets become easier to reach. Extra scarves appear from carefully packed chests. The father studies distant clouds with the calm expression of someone who has learned that weather deserves respect, not arguments. The children gather closer to the wagon. Their laughter grows softer now. Even they understand that the season ahead will not offer many easy days. Far across the prairie, a line of dark birds lifts into the pale sky before disappearing toward distant trees. The sight lasts only seconds, yet somehow makes the landscape feel even larger. The frontier has a remarkable talent for reminding you how small one wagon truly is. Still, there is no panic, only preparation. One careful decision follows another. Every rope tied securely, every barrel checked, every blanket folded, every animal watched. Because survival often depends less upon dramatic heroics, and far more upon remembering ordinary things at exactly the right moment. You glance once more beneath the canvas cover. It does not look luxurious. It does not even look particularly comfortable. Yet over the coming months it will shelter dreams, arguments, laughter, tears, cold fingers, warm bread, whispered prayers, tired children, hopeful parents, and countless quiet moments between them all. It is less a vehicle than a promise carried on wooden wheels. The first truly cold evening waits somewhere just ahead, hidden beyond the next rise, where the prairie stretches endlessly into the fading light, and the family begins searching for a place to greet the long frontier winter together. The wagon comes to a gentle stop just as the last light slips across the prairie. You step down carefully, your boots pressing into ground that has already begun to stiffen with the evening frost. The air smells cleaner now, almost sharp enough to taste. Somewhere nearby, an ox gives a slow, contented grunt, while another shakes its heavy head, causing the harness to jingle softly. You turn back toward the covered wagon. It looks surprisingly small against the endless horizon. From a distance, it resembles a little white shell resting in a vast ocean of grass. Up close, however, every inch serves a purpose. Nothing has been added simply because it looks nice. Every board, every peg, every knot in the rope earns its place through usefulness. You pull back the canvas flap and duck inside once again. Your head almost brushes the curved roof. The interior feels less like a room and more like an unusually determined cupboard. The wagon measures only a few feet across, leaving just enough space for carefully arranged supplies along each side and a narrow passage through the middle. If everyone tried standing at once, elbows would quickly begin diplomatic negotiations. The wooden floor carries faint grooves where heavy barrels have rubbed during the months of travel. Tiny flecks of straw gather in the corners. A forgotten button glints beside one wheel well. Someone has tucked dried wildflowers between two wooden ribs supporting the canvas. Their colour has faded almost completely, but they remain there anyway. Perhaps they remind someone of the home left behind. Perhaps they simply make this little space feel more human. You run your fingers across one of the storage chests. Its brass latch has been polished smooth by countless hands. Inside, rest-folded shirts, wool stockings, carefully repaired gloves, and a single Sunday dress wrapped inside cloth to protect it from dust. Every garment has likely been mended several times already. Nothing is thrown away unless it truly cannot be saved. A small sewing kit occupies its own special corner. Needles, thread, buttons collected from worn-out clothing. Little scraps of fabric that might someday become patches. The ability to repair mattered almost as much as the ability to build. A torn sleeve during winter was not merely untidy. It could allow precious warmth to escape during long, freezing days. Near the front sits a wooden toolbox. The tools inside look familiar enough that you recognize their purpose despite the passing centuries. A hammer, a handsaw, a brace for drilling holes, nails stored inside a leather pouch, spare bolts wrapped in cloth so they do not rattle loose. Every item waits patiently for the moment something inevitably breaks, and something always breaks. Wood expands, wood shrinks, iron loosens, leather dries, wheels complain. Nature keeps an excellent schedule for reminding people that maintenance never ends. You notice the canvas overhead glowing softly from the fading light outside. Many people imagine the famous white covers were waterproof miracles. They were not. Most wagon covers were made from heavy cotton canvas, sometimes treated with linseed oil or other protective mixtures to improve resistance against rain. The treatment helped shed water for a while. Although persistent storms eventually found their way through, families quickly learned where each familiar drip appeared during bad weather. You smile at the thought. Every house seems to develop its own personality. This one simply happens to roll across a continent. The mother reaches beneath one bench and lifts out a small tin box. Inside rests a collection of treasures that weigh almost nothing, a faded letter, several family photographs called daguerreotypes, a lock of baby hair tied with ribbon, a tiny wooden toy horse carved years earlier. These possessions contribute nothing to survival in the practical sense. They cannot cook supper, they cannot pull a wagon, they cannot chop firewood, yet nobody considers leaving them behind. Sometimes the smallest objects carry the greatest weight. You wonder which belongings from your own home you would choose if every possession had to fit inside this wagon. That question lingers pleasantly in your mind. The father checks the wagon bows supporting the canvas roof. Each curved piece of wood flexes slightly under gentle pressure. They appear sturdy now, but rough trails demand constant attention. A cracked support could allow snow or rain to collect where it should, instead slide harmlessly away. Even the ropes deserve inspection. A loose knot today may become tomorrow's larger problem. The youngest child crawls beneath one blanket pile and disappears completely. For a few moments only muffled giggles emerge. Then two curious eyes peek out through the wool. The game requires no expensive toys, only an imagination. Children possess a remarkable talent for discovering castles inside cupboards and adventures beneath blankets. Life on the frontier rarely erased that gift. You hear someone begin humming quietly while organising cooking utensils. The tune drifts through the evening air without urgency. No audience, no performance, simply music accompanying familiar work. One curious story passed along by later descendants claim that some pioneer children believed the wagon canvas glowed at night because friendly spirits watched over travelling families. Adults probably smiled at the tale without correcting it too quickly. After all, a comforting bedtime story costs nothing and weighs even less than those treasured dried flowers. Whether such stories were widely believed remains uncertain. Yet they reveal something gentle about frontier family life. Hope often arrived wearing the clothes of imagination. Outside, the sky deepens toward violet. Stars appear one by one, without electric lights. The heavens seem astonishingly crowded. You almost forget how many stars exist until darkness removes every modern distraction. The family lights a modest lantern. Its warm glow transforms the wagon interior into a tiny island of amber surrounded by endless night. Shadows dance across the curved canvas roof. The children watch them with sleepy fascination. One shadow resembles a rabbit. Another looks suspiciously like an elderly chicken wearing an impressive hat. Nobody mentions that last observation. Some mysteries deserve preservation. Scholars continue to debate exactly how much comfort emigrants sacrifice voluntarily in exchange for carrying extra food, tools, or trade goods. Surviving journals often emphasize practical necessities. Yet archaeology occasionally uncovers decorative items that suggest many families deliberately reserved precious space for beauty alongside utility. Perhaps that balance mattered more than numbers alone can explain. People need reasons to smile just as surely as they need flour. The wagon gently creaks as the evening temperature falls. Wood responds to cold with tiny sounds, almost whispers, if you listen carefully enough. The entire vehicle seems alive, stretching quietly after another long day. You lean back against one storage chest. The wood feels cool through your coat. Outside, someone adds another log to the fire. Its crackling reaches you through the canvas. The smell of wood smoke slips inside, mixing with leather, wool, flour, and faint traces of dried herbs hanging from a peg near the front. It is an unusual combination. Yet before long it begins to feel comforting. Home, after all, is often recognized by scent before sight. The lantern flame flickers as a light breeze nudges the canvas. Nobody seems alarmed. The family has experienced countless evenings just like this one. Routine creates confidence. Confidence invites calm. You realize the wagon is more than transportation. It is wardrobe, pantry, workshop, bedroom, storage room, memory chest, shelter. Hope balanced carefully upon 4 wooden wheels. Tomorrow it will continue rolling westward. Tonight it simply breathes quietly beneath the stars, holding everything this family owns while winter inches steadily closer across the sleeping prairie. Morning arrives without asking anyone whether they feel ready. You wake to the soft sound of canvas shifting in the breeze and the low rumble of oxen waiting patiently for breakfast. The lantern has long since gone dark, replaced by pale blue light filtering through the wagon cover. Tiny crystals of frost cling to the outside of the canvas, sparkling whenever the first rays of sunlight find them. The cold reaches your fingertips before your eyes are fully open. You pull a wool blanket a little tighter around your shoulders, enjoying one last moment of warmth before another busy day begins. Outside, the camp slowly comes to life. Someone yawns, someone coughs. A kettle is already hanging above a newly lit fire, sending a thin ribbon of smoke into the still morning air. The smell is comforting, wood smoke, coffee, freshly warmed porridge, a hint of bacon saved for special mornings. The scents drift together so naturally that they seem to belong to the prairie itself. Today is not a travel day. Instead, the family has decided to examine every supply inside the wagon before winter grows even harsher. That means every package comes out, every bundle is checked, every precious inch of space is reconsidered. You climb back inside and begin helping. The first barrel contains flour. It feels astonishingly heavy. The father taps the lid with quiet satisfaction before opening it just enough to inspect the contents. The flour remains dry, which is excellent news. Damp flour quickly becomes useless, and nobody wishes to discover spoiled food halfway through a snowstorm. Next comes cornmeal, then beans, then rice wrapped inside thick cloth sacks. Each container has been sealed with remarkable care. Food represents security. Every meal eaten today is one less meal available tomorrow. That simple truth follows every pioneer family throughout the journey. You notice how carefully the supplies have been arranged. The heaviest items rest low, helping keep the wagon balanced over rough ground. Fragile belongings ride higher where sudden bumps are less likely to crush them. Even the smallest empty spaces have been filled with rolled blankets or extra clothing to stop everything from shifting during travel. There is almost an artistic quality to the packing. If one item moves, 3 others must move as well. It resembles a giant wooden puzzle assembled with equal parts patience and necessity. The mother unwraps several carefully folded quilts. Each one tells its own quiet story. Some squares come from old dresses, others were once work shirts. One patch still carries a faded floral pattern that may have belonged to a grandmother many years earlier. The quilt is more than bedding. It is memory stitched into fabric. As you smooth one across your lap, you notice how thick it feels. The weight alone promises comfort during freezing nights. Nearby rests a small sack filled with sewing supplies, not just thread this time, but spare pieces of cloth collected over many years. Nothing is wasted. A sleeve can become a child's mitten. A worn blanket can become patches. Even tiny scraps may reinforce a pocket or repair a torn apron. Modern closets often encourage replacing damaged clothing. Out here, every repair extends survival just a little further. The father lifts a long wooden box. Inside rests the family's rifle, cleaned carefully and wrapped in cloth to protect it from moisture. Beside it are simple tools for maintaining the firearm, each tucked neatly into its own place. For many pioneer families, a firearm serves several purposes. It could help provide food through hunting, protect livestock from predators, and offer reassurance in isolated country. Although ammunition remained valuable and was rarely wasted on unnecessary shots, most days passed without dramatic encounters. Quiet preparation mattered far more than excitement. You continue sorting through supplies, candles, soap, a bundle of extra rope, leather straps, a sharpening stone worn smooth by years of use, a tiny bottle of medicine. Each object appears ordinary. Together they represent months of careful planning. One forgotten necessity could transform an inconvenience into a genuine hardship. You come across something unexpected, a cast iron waffle iron. You blink in surprise. The family notices your expression and smiles. Apparently, even on the frontier, someone occasionally dreams about waffles. It is oddly reassuring. History has a way of reminding you that people from long ago enjoyed little treats just as much as anyone today. Perhaps breakfast simply tastes better when shaped into little squares. One unusual tale from several pioneer communities tells of families carrying apple seeds across the frontier inside small cloth pouches worn beneath clothing. The seeds represented future orchards rather than immediate meals. Whether every story happened exactly as remembered is impossible to verify, yet the image captures something important about frontier thinking. People packed tomorrow alongside today. Hope occupied surprisingly little space. Outside, the children gather kindling while laughing over a game involving unusually shaped sticks. One proudly discovers a branch resembling a dragon. Another insists it looks more like an upside-down goose. The debate grows wonderfully serious. Adults wisely avoid interfering. Some questions deserve lifelong mystery. Inside the wagon, another careful decision awaits. A cracked wooden bowl has become difficult to use. The family examines it from every angle. Could it be repaired? Perhaps. Should it be carried further? Probably. Eventually they decide to keep it. Even damaged tools often remain useful for mixing dough or collecting berries later in the journey. Very little reaches the point of complete retirement. You notice several books tucked safely beneath folded blankets. One is the family Bible, another contains poems, a third teaches basic arithmetic. Books occupy valuable room and add considerable weight, yet many emigrants carried them anyway. Reading offered education, comfort, entertainment, and connection to familiar routines during long evenings. Words travelled west just as surely as wagons did. Historians continue to discuss how accurately surviving packing lists reflect everyday pioneer life. Official guides recommended certain essential supplies, but personal diaries reveal countless individual choices shaped by family traditions, regional customs, and unexpected priorities. No two wagons were truly identical. Each reflected the people who filled it. The inspection continues through the afternoon. Every package returns to its carefully planned location. Heavy barrels first, then cooking tools, then blankets, then clothing. The treasured keepsake box slides gently into its familiar corner. The dried flowers remain tucked between the wooden ribs above your head. Nothing has changed, and yet everything somehow feels more secure. You understand the wagon better now. Its crowded interior no longer appears random. It has its own quiet logic. Every object knows exactly where it belongs. The family finishes by tying the canvas flap closed. The father steps back, studying the wagon with thoughtful eyes. Not proudly, not anxiously, simply carefully. Winter has a habit of testing preparation. No amount of confidence can replace good planning. The afternoon sun begins sinking lower. Golden light spreads across the prairie, turning dry grass into waves of glowing amber. Long shadows stretch beside the wagon wheels, making them appear even taller against the frozen ground. You place one hand upon the weathered wood once more. It feels familiar now, less like visiting someone else's home, more like becoming part of its quiet rhythm. Tomorrow the trail will ask new questions. Tonight every answer rests safely packed beneath the curved white canvas, waiting patiently for the long cold journey that still lies ahead. The wagon begins moving again beneath a sky that looks polished and endless. You hear the familiar morning orchestra returning. Wooden wheels groan. Harness straps tighten. Oxen breathe heavily into the cold air. Boots press into frozen soil as the family walks beside the wagon, saving the animals from unnecessary strain. The trail ahead does not look like a road in the way you understand one today. There are no painted lines, no signs pointing toward the next town, no smooth pavement waiting patiently beneath your feet. Instead, there are faint tracks left by thousands of wheels before you, sometimes disappearing completely when wind, rain, or snow decides to erase yesterday's progress. You follow those uncertain marks across the landscape. The prairie seems peaceful, almost too peaceful. That is one of the great surprises of frontier travel. The most intimidating challenges often arrive quietly. A cloudy sky, a damaged wheel, a tired animal, a missing tool, a river rising just enough to become a serious obstacle. Nothing announces itself with dramatic music. Nature simply waits. The family has learned to watch carefully, The father studies the horizon. The mother checks the supplies. The children keep their eyes open for anything interesting. Because even difficult journeys can contain moments of wonder. A flock of birds rises suddenly from the grass. A rabbit disappears beneath a patch of snow. A distant herd of animals moves like a shadow across the hills. The world is constantly speaking. You simply have to learn how to listen. By the middle of the day, the trail becomes softer. Autumn has nearly surrendered to winter, and the ground carries the memory of every recent storm. Wagon wheels sink slightly into muddy sections, leaving deep marks behind them. The sound changes from a steady wooden rhythm to a heavier pulling and dragging noise. The oxen slow. Nobody complains. Everyone understands that rushing rarely helps. The covered wagon moves at a pace chosen by the land itself. Many families travelling across the American frontier followed major routes such as the Oregon Trail, which became one of the most important migration paths during the 19th century. Thousands of emigrants used these routes between the 1840s and 1860s, seeking farmland, economic opportunities, and new beginnings farther west. Their journeys often depended on careful timing because arriving too late could mean facing severe winter conditions in unfamiliar territory. You look at the wagon ahead and imagine the decisions behind every departure. Leaving a familiar home was not a simple adventure. It meant saying goodbye to neighbours. It meant leaving behind places where family names were known. It meant carrying memories inside wooden boxes and hoping the future would justify the enormous effort. The trail creates a strange mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Every mile offers possibility. Every mile also asks something in return. The afternoon brings a challenge. A small stream crosses the path ahead. During summer, it might have been nothing more than a pleasant place to refill water containers. Now the colder weather has changed everything. Ice clings to the edges, and the current moves faster than expected. The family stops. Everyone examines the crossing. This is the quiet calculation of frontier life. Can the wagon pass safely? Will the wheels lose their grip? Are the animals strong enough? Should they wait? There is no perfect answer, only careful judgment. The father tests the ground with a long stick. The children watch silently. Even they understand that some moments require patience. Eventually, the wagon moves forward, slowly, carefully. The wheels enter the water. The sound changes instantly. A cold splash reaches your boots. The oxen lean forward with impressive strength. The wagon rises slightly, then settles again as it reaches firmer ground. A small cheer follows. Not a dramatic celebration, just a few relieved smiles. Sometimes victory on the frontier is simply getting to the other side. You continue onward as evening approaches. The wind becomes sharper. It slips through clothing seams and reminds you that winter is not waiting politely in the distance anymore. It is arriving. The family begins searching for a place to stop. A good campsite can make the difference between a comfortable night and a miserable one. They look for natural protection. A line of trees, a small hill, a location away from low areas where cold air gathers, a water source nearby, flat enough ground for the wagon. Each detail matters. One unusual piece of frontier folklore describes travellers carrying small mirrors because some believed reflections could confuse wandering spirits that followed camps at night. Whether this was a common practice or simply a charming story passed between generations remains uncertain. But it reveals how people mixed practical survival with personal beliefs during stressful journeys. The evening camp slowly forms. The wagon circles into position. Blankets are removed. Cooking supplies appear. Animals are cared for before anyone thinks about their own comfort. This order says everything about frontier priorities. The animals are not just transportation, they are partners. A tired ox means a slower journey. An injured horse means serious trouble. The family understands this relationship deeply. You watch the father brush dirt from an animal's coat. The movement is gentle, almost like thanking an old friend. A small fire begins to glow. Smoke rises into the darkening sky. The smell of burning wood returns, wrapping around the camp like a familiar blanket. Dinner is simple. Perhaps beans, perhaps bread, perhaps a little dried meat. Nothing fancy. Yet after a day walking through cold wind, the meal feels surprisingly rich. You sit beside the fire and listen. Stories begin. Someone remembers a funny mistake from an earlier camp. Someone imitates the strange noises a wagon made during a rough trail. The children laugh. For a moment, the hardships become smaller. The camp becomes a temporary village. Several families might gather nearby, sharing news and helping with repairs. These brief communities appeared throughout migration routes because travellers understood that cooperation improved everyone's chances. Scholars continue to debate whether wagon journeys were primarily individual family experiences or whether they functioned more like temporary communities connected by shared hardship. Personal accounts show both sides. Some families kept mostly to themselves, while others depended heavily on neighbours they met along the trail. Perhaps the answer changes from wagon to wagon. Human relationships rarely fit neatly into a single story. As darkness settles completely, you crawl beneath the canvas once more. The wagon feels different after a day on the trail. The wooden boards hold the memory of every bump. The blankets carry the scent of smoke. The supplies sit quietly around you. Outside, the wind moves across the prairie. It sounds almost like waves reaching a distant shore. You close your eyes. Tomorrow there will be another stretch of uncertain trail, another decision, another test of patience. But tonight, the wagon rests, the family rests, and beneath the wide winter sky, this small travelling home remains steady, waiting for the next sunrise to reveal what the frontier has prepared. The morning arrives with a different feeling. You sense it before you even open your eyes. The wagon is quieter. The wind has changed. The air no longer carries the mild coolness of late autumn, but the sharper edge of true winter. Outside the canvas, frost has painted delicate patterns across the grass, and every sound seems slightly softer, as though the entire prairie has wrapped itself in a thick blanket. You slowly sit up. The family knows this is no ordinary stopping place. This time, they are not simply resting for one night. Winter has arrived. The journey must pause. The wagon that carried them forward now needs to become a shelter, a home, a place where everyone will wake, eat, work, laugh, worry, and sleep until the season finally releases its grip. You step outside and look across the landscape. Choosing a winter camp is a serious decision. A beautiful view is not enough. A family cannot survive simply because the sunset looks lovely. The campsite must offer protection, a nearby source of water, enough firewood, some defense against strong winds, ground that will not become a frozen swamp after every storm. The father walks slowly across the area, examining the land like someone reading a complicated letter. He notices the direction of the wind. He studies the nearby trees. He checks whether the wagon sits on solid ground. Every detail matters. You follow along, realizing that frontier knowledge often came from paying attention rather than from written instructions. The land itself was the teacher. A small group of trees becomes the favourite choice. They are not a thick forest, but they offer enough protection to soften the winter winds. Their branches reach upward, bare and quiet, while the ground beneath them is covered with fallen leaves and the first thin layer of snow. The family begins creating a temporary settlement, not a town, not even a proper village, just a small collection of wagons arranged carefully against the season. One wagon faces another, creating a little open space in the middle where fires can be built and people can gather. The arrangement provides companionship. It also creates a sense of security. A single wagon on the open prairie can feel incredibly small. Several wagons together feel like a community. You watch everyone work. The canvas cover is tightened. Extra ropes are added. Blankets are hung where needed. Spaces beneath the wagon are checked and cleared. Even the smallest improvement matters. The family knows they will spend many hours inside this limited space. A wagon designed for movement must now perform the job of a cabin. That transformation is fascinating. The wheels remain. The wooden frame remains. The canvas remains. Yet somehow the purpose changes. The wagon becomes a room, a kitchen, a bedroom, a gathering place, a small world surrounded by snow. During the 19th century, many emigrant families did eventually leave their wagons behind when they reached permanent settlements, building cabins or homes from local materials. However, for travellers caught by winter before reaching their destination, wagons sometimes became temporary shelters for weeks or months. You look around the camp and imagine the strange experience of living between two worlds. Behind you is the place you left. Ahead is the place you hope to reach. For now, you exist somewhere in between. The first evening in winter camp feels almost peaceful. The fire burns brighter than before because everyone knows warmth must be protected. Wood becomes one of the most important resources. Every branch gathered today represents comfort later. The children help collect smaller pieces while adults search for larger logs. The cold makes every task slower. Gloves become stiff, boots become heavy, fingers lose their sensitivity. Yet the work continues. The prairie does not pause because people are tired. You notice a small wooden board placed near the fire. Someone has carved simple marks into it. At first, you assume it is a practical record, perhaps counting supplies, perhaps tracking days. Then you learn it is something else. The children have been recording the number of snowfalls. It has become a little winter calendar, a tiny piece of creativity in a season that demands seriousness. This is one of those charming reminders that even difficult lives contain moments of play. A quirky story from some frontier communities describes people keeping special storm jars filled with small objects found during unusual weather events, such as strange stones or unusual bits of plant material discovered after storms. Whether these collections were widespread traditions or simply local curiosities, they show how people often turned remarkable moments into memories. The evening meal is prepared inside the camp. Smoke curls upward, steam rises from the cooking pot, the smell of beans and warm bread drifts through the cold air. Everyone gathers closer than they would during warmer months. Winter encourages togetherness. There is simply nowhere else to go. Inside the wagon later that night, you notice how carefully the space has changed. Supplies are no longer arranged only for travel, they are arranged for living. The cooking items are easier to reach. Blankets are placed where hands can find them quickly. Daily necessities move closer. Things needed only occasionally are pushed deeper into storage. The wagon develops a new rhythm. Morning, cooking, cleaning, repairing, gathering fuel, preparing food, resting, repeating. The days become connected like beads on a string. One follows another. You begin to understand that survival is often built from repetition, not dramatic moments. Not constant excitement, simply thousands of small actions performed correctly. Historians still disagree over how much hardship wintering families faced inside wagons, compared with those living in early cabins and settlements. Some accounts describe wagons as surprisingly adaptable shelters, while others emphasize the discomfort and danger of spending long periods in such cramped spaces. The truth likely depended on circumstances. A well-prepared family in a sheltered location might find stability. A poorly supplied group caught in severe weather might face overwhelming difficulties. There was no single frontier experience. Each family carried its own story. As night deepens, the camp becomes quiet. The fire outside crackles gently. Snow begins falling. At first, only a few flakes drift downward. Then more appear. They land on the canvas roof with tiny taps. Tap, tap, tap. The sound is strangely soothing. Inside the wagon, the family settles beneath layers of blankets. The walls are close. The ceiling is low. The space is crowded. But there is warmth. There is shelter. There is the comforting knowledge that everyone made it through another day. You close your eyes and listen. The wagon creaks softly as the temperature drops. The wind moves around the camp. The animals shift in their resting places. The fire slowly burns lower. This is the beginning of the long winter pause. The wheels will not turn tomorrow. The trail will wait. For now, the family has created a tiny home beneath the frozen sky. And within this fragile little shelter, life continues one careful day at a time. The first true winter nights settle over the wagon camp with a quiet confidence. There is no dramatic announcement, no single moment when the season arrives and declares itself. Instead, winter slowly takes possession of everything. The morning water container develops a thin layer of ice. The wagon wheels become harder to move. The grass loses its last traces of green. The wind finds every tiny opening in clothing, blankets, and canvas. You wake before sunrise because the cold has a way of making sleep feel lighter. The family is still curled beneath blankets, trying to preserve every bit of warmth gathered during the night. The wagon interior is dark except for a faint grey glow entering through the canvas. You can hear breathing, soft movements, the occasional rustle of fabric. Nobody wants to leave the warmth of the bedding, but eventually someone has to move. The fire needs attention, breakfast needs preparing, animals need checking. Winter does not accept late mornings. You carefully sit up, feeling the chill immediately. The wagon interior has become a delicate balance between comfort and discomfort. The blankets hold warmth. The wooden walls block some wind. The canvas roof provides shelter. Yet cold remains a constant visitor. It waits patiently around the edges. Sleeping arrangements require creativity. The youngest children often receive the warmest positions, tucked between adults or surrounded by extra blankets. Older children may sleep closer to the edges. Adults adjust their positions throughout the night, sharing warmth and making sure everyone is reasonably comfortable. Reasonably comfortable is an important phrase here. Nobody's expecting luxury. The frontier does not offer luxury. You smile slightly as you imagine explaining this arrangement to someone today. Welcome to your winter bedroom. It contains a wooden floor, several roommates, a few sacks of flour, and a strong possibility that your pillow will occasionally become a bag of clothing. Not exactly a 5-star experience. Yet people adapted. Humans are remarkably skilled at turning difficult situations into ordinary routines. The family learns small tricks. Blankets are layered carefully. Clothing is kept close while sleeping so it is not painfully cold in the morning. Boots are positioned near warmth without placing them too close to the fire. Every action has a reason. A tiny improvement can make a long winter much easier. Outside, the camp begins waking. The fire grows stronger. Smoke curls upward through the cold air. The animals move slowly, their breath forming clouds around them. The oxen are especially important during this season. Although the wagon is resting, the animals still require food, water, and care. A pioneer family could not simply forget about the creatures that carried their entire world. You watch the father walk toward them with a bucket. His movements are slow but familiar. The oxen recognize the routine. They turn their heads as he approaches. There is a quiet relationship here. Not sentimental in the way modern stories sometimes portray animals, but based on dependence and respect. Their strength made travel possible. Their health protected the family's future. Inside the wagon, the morning meal begins. The cooking space is limited, so preparation must be organised. A pot hangs carefully. Ingredients are measured. Nothing is wasted. A little extra flour today could mean a better meal tomorrow. A small amount of fuel saved now could mean warmth during a colder night. Every decision stretches forward. The smell of breakfast fills the wagon. Warm grains, coffee, freshly heated bread. The scent pushes back against the cold. Food becomes more than fuel. It becomes comfort. It reminds everyone that life continues despite the weather outside. A mainstream historical fact is that many emigrant families on Western trails relied heavily on preserved foods because fresh supplies were difficult to obtain during long journeys. Dried fruits, cured meats, beans, flour, and other durable foods helped travellers survive when markets and settlements were far away. You look at the shelves and storage spaces differently now. These are not simply containers, they are time. Each barrel represents future mornings. Each sack represents future meals. Each carefully saved ingredient represents another day the family can continue. After breakfast, the wagon becomes a workshop. The cold weather does not stop activity, it changes it. Clothing repairs become especially important. The mother sits near the light, carefully stitching a tear in a coat sleeve. The needle moves steadily, in and out, in and out. The rhythm is almost hypnotic. Nearby, someone repairs a harness strap. Another person cleans tools. The children practice reading from a book. Winter creates long stretches of time that must be filled. Work becomes a way to measure the passing days. A curious frontier custom involves some families saving small pieces of coloured cloth from important events and sewing them into later quilts. A wedding garment, a child's clothing, or a special fabric from an earlier home might eventually become part of a blanket used on the trail. These quilts became quiet records of family history, even when nobody wrote the stories down. As evening arrives, the temperature drops further. The fire becomes the centre of life. People gather closer. The wagon camp grows quieter. The darkness outside feels enormous. There are no streetlights, no distant traffic, no nearby buildings, only the wide prairie and the stars above it. You look upward and understand why the night sky fascinated so many travellers. Without modern light, the stars appear almost impossibly bright. The Milky Way stretches across the darkness like a pale river. For a moment, the cold seems less important. You feel connected to something much larger. Around the fire, stories begin. Someone remembers a home left behind. Someone talks about a place they hope to reach. Someone laughs about a small mistake from the journey. These stories serve an important purpose. They keep memories alive. They remind everyone that life is not only about surviving, it is also about belonging. Scholars still debate whether winter isolation strengthened pioneer family bonds or increased emotional strain within households. Some historians point to shared responsibilities and cooperation, while others highlight the stress caused by confinement, uncertainty, and limited privacy. Both experiences could exist together. People can love each other deeply and still find difficult circumstances exhausting. That is true in any century. Later, as you settle beneath the blankets again, the wagon feels familiar. The narrow space no longer seems only restrictive. It feels protective. The wooden walls have heard countless conversations. The canvas has endured wind and snow. The floor has carried supplies, children, tired feet, and quiet footsteps. This little structure has become part of the family story. Outside, snow continues falling. Each flake lands softly against the wagon roof. The sound is gentle, almost like a whisper. You close your eyes, The fire fades slowly, the animals rest, the family sleeps, and beneath the frozen sky, inside this small home on wheels, another winter night passes peacefully. Morning arrives slowly inside the winter camp. The first thing you notice is not the sunlight. It is the cold. The kind of cold that seems to settle into the wooden boards beneath you and quietly remind you that the day's work will begin whether you're ready or not. You hear someone moving outside. A boot presses into the snow. A bucket touches the ground. The animals shift and breathe heavily. The wagon gently rocks as someone climbs inside carrying a small bundle of firewood. The smell arrives before the person does. Fresh snow, cold air, wood smoke. These scents mix with the familiar smells of the wagon itself, creating the unique atmosphere of a frontier winter morning. You sit up beneath the blankets and look around. The wagon interior is no longer just a travel space. It has become a place where every daily activity happens within arm's reach. Cooking, eating, repairing, teaching, resting, waiting. The family has learned to make peace with limited space. The wagon asks everyone to be patient. A person cannot simply walk away when annoyed. There is nowhere far to go. A disagreement may begin beside the cooking pot and end beside the sleeping blankets. Privacy becomes a luxury. Kindness becomes a necessity. You watch as breakfast preparations begin. Food is one of the greatest concerns during a long winter. The family cannot simply visit a nearby market when supplies become low. There's no convenient store waiting but on the next hill instead. Every meal depends on decisions made weeks or months earlier. How much flour was packed? How carefully was the meat preserved? How often can the family afford a larger portion? These questions quietly shape each day. The mother measures ingredients with careful attention. A handful of beans, a portion of flour, a small amount of salt. Nothing is measured casually. A careless moment could mean losing valuable supplies. Cooking inside a covered wagon requires patience. Smoke has limited places to escape. The wind can make flames difficult to control. The cold can slow every task. Yet meals still appear. Warm food still reaches waiting hands. This is one of the remarkable parts of frontier life. The ordinary continues even when circumstances are extraordinary. You watch a pot simmer above the fire. The steam rises gently. The smell spreads through the wagon. For a moment, the frozen world outside feels far away. A simple meal becomes an event. Everyone gathers closer. Bowls are passed around. Conversation begins. The family discusses the weather, the condition of the animals, the amount of firewood remaining, tomorrow's chores. The topics may sound practical, but they are the foundation of survival. A mainstream historical fact is that many pioneers travelling west depended on staple foods such as flour, beans, salt pork, and dried fruits because these foods could last through long periods without refrigeration. Careful food storage was essential because travellers often crossed enormous distances between reliable supply points. You glance at the supplies stacked nearby and understand them differently now. The barrels and sacks are not merely objects, they are promises. They represent future breakfasts, future dinners, future moments when someone will sit beside the fire and feel grateful for a decision made months earlier. After eating, the work continues. The family gathers fuel whenever possible. Firewood becomes one of the most valuable resources during winter. A warm fire requires constant attention. It must be collected, carried, stored, protected from moisture. You step outside with the others. The snow crunches beneath your boots. The sound is surprisingly loud in the quiet landscape. The trees nearby offer some branches, but gathering enough wood requires effort. Every piece is examined. Too small, and it burns away quickly. Too damp, and it produces more smoke than heat. The children collect smaller sticks while adults handle heavier pieces. Everyone contributes. A quirky detail from some frontier accounts is that certain families carefully saved animal bones after meals because they could later be used for tools, buttons, or small household items. The idea of using every possible resource was not simply thriftiness in isolated conditions. Discarded materials could become unexpectedly useful. You carry an armful of branches back toward camp. Your fingers grow cold despite your gloves. The wind finds openings in your clothing. You begin to appreciate how exhausting ordinary tasks can become when every movement happens outdoors in freezing weather. Today, walking to gather fuel replaces the simple act of turning a household heater dial. There is no button, no switch, no instant warmth, only effort. The afternoon brings another challenge. The family discovers that one of the cooking tools has developed a crack. It is a small problem, but small problems matter. The father examines it carefully. Can it be repaired? Can another item serve the same purpose? The answer requires creativity. Frontier families often lived with uncertainty, adjusting plans whenever supplies failed or weather changed. Nothing was guaranteed. You notice that nobody reacts dramatically. There is disappointment, but there is also experience. They have solved many problems before. They will solve this one too. Later, the family spends time preserving what remains of their supplies. Containers are checked. Cloth coverings are tightened. Anything vulnerable to moisture is moved farther from the cold edges of the wagon. Winter rewards careful habits. A forgotten container outside overnight may become damaged. A poorly sealed package may ruin valuable food. Attention becomes a form of protection. As evening approaches, the fire becomes the center of the camp once again. The temperature drops. The sky turns pale pink, then grey, then dark. The family gathers close. Someone begins telling a story, perhaps about a place they left behind, perhaps about an unusual event on the trail, perhaps about a future home they hope to build. Stories become another kind of fuel. They warm people differently. Historians still argue whether pioneer communities relied more heavily on practical cooperation or emotional connection when facing long winters. Some researchers emphasize shared labor and mutual assistance, while others focus on the importance of family traditions, storytelling, and personal resilience. Maybe both were necessary. A person needs strong hands to survive, but they also need reasons to keep going. You listen as the wagon settles around you. The wooden frame makes familiar sounds. The fire outside crackles. Snow moves gently across the ground, inside this small space. A family creates warmth from almost nothing, not because the winter is easy, not because the journey is simple, but because human beings have always found ways to build comfort in uncomfortable places. The meal is finished. The tools are put away. The blankets are arranged. Another day has passed. Tomorrow will bring more chores, more weather, more uncertainty. But tonight, the family rests knowing that they have food, shelter, and each other, and sometimes, on the long road through winter, that is enough. The winter morning begins with a sound that you almost miss. A small laugh, not a loud laugh, not the kind that fills a room, just a quiet little burst of happiness from somewhere beneath a pile of blankets. You open your eyes and find one of the children already awake, making shapes with fingers against the faint morning light filtering through the canvas. The shadows move across the wagon wall. A bird, a strange creature with too many legs, a shape that looks suspiciously like an animal nobody has ever seen. For a moment. The cold outside feels distant. Children have always possessed a remarkable ability to create worlds wherever they happen to be, even inside a crowded covered wagon during a difficult winter. Imagination finds room to breathe. You watch the child continue the game while the rest of the family slowly wakes. The wagon is still. The fire has burned low. The blankets hold the last traces of warmth from the night. Outside, the prairie waits beneath a pale layer of snow. Another day of winter begins for children growing up on the frontier. Winter was not simply a season of waiting. It was a season of learning. Every task became a lesson. Every moment offered something new to understand. A child might learn how to mend clothing, feed animals, carry water, prepare food, recognize weather patterns, or understand the importance of saving supplies. Education did not always happen inside a schoolhouse. Sometimes it happened beside a cooking fire, sometimes beside a wagon wheel, sometimes while walking through snow, gathering small pieces of wood. You step outside with the children. The cold immediately reminds you that this is not a holiday morning. The air feels sharp, your breath rises in front of you. The snow reflects the pale sunlight so brightly that you have to narrow your eyes. Yet the children do not seem defeated. They have discovered their own winter routines. One child searches for animal tracks. Another collects interesting stones hidden beneath the snow. A third carefully checks whether yesterday's snow sculpture has survived the night. It has not. The sculpture has collapsed into a mysterious frozen lump. Everyone agrees it was probably the work of a powerful snow creature. No one has evidence. The investigation continues. A quirky detail from some frontier childhood accounts is that children sometimes created toys from whatever materials were available, including corn husks, scraps of fabric, carved wood, and leftover household items. Store-bought toys were rare luxuries, so imagination often transformed ordinary materials into companions for play. You watch a child holding a small wooden figure carved from a leftover piece of lumber. It is simple. A few lines, a rough shape. Nothing like the polished toys found in modern shops, yet the child holds it carefully. To that child, it is not a piece of wood. It is a friend inside the wagon. Lessons continue. A book appears. The pages are worn. The corners are soft from repeated use. Reading material takes up valuable space. But many families believed education mattered enough to carry along. A parent guides a child through letters and numbers. The lesson is slow. There are interruptions. Someone needs help outside. The fire needs tending. A pot needs stirring. Learning happens between responsibilities. That does not make it less meaningful. It makes it different. You listen as the child sounds out words carefully, the same language spoken generations earlier, the same desire to understand the world, the same small victories when a difficult sentence finally makes sense. Many pioneer families valued literacy because reading allowed children to study religious texts, practical guides, letters from distant relatives, and other forms of knowledge. During the 19th century, education varied greatly depending on location, family resources, and access to teachers. But many parents made efforts to continue lessons even while travelling. The wagon becomes a classroom without walls. The prairie becomes the map. The weather becomes the science lesson. The journey itself becomes the textbook. Of course, childhood still included chores. The children do not spend every day playing. They help. They carry small buckets. They gather kindling. They watch younger siblings. They assist with preparing meals. The responsibilities are real, but within those responsibilities, children find moments of freedom. A walk to collect wood becomes an expedition. A search for water becomes a discovery mission. A task that adults consider necessary can become an adventure through a child's eyes. You remember that the frontier was not only a place of hardship, it was also a place where young people experienced enormous spaces and unusual independence. A child could look across miles of open land and feel that the world was almost endless. The same landscape that frightened adults could inspire curiosity in children. As afternoon arrives, the weather changes, the wind becomes stronger. Everyone returns closer to the wagon. The children help secure loose items. They understand the signs now, the movement of clouds, the feeling of the air, the way animals behave before a storm. Knowledge passes quietly from one generation to the next. A parent points toward the sky. A child learns. Another piece of frontier wisdom is added to their growing collection. Later, inside the wagon, the children create entertainment from almost nothing. A guessing game begins. Someone tells a story. Someone invents a silly character. Laughter fills the cramped space. The wagon walls seem to hold the sound. It is easy to imagine that difficult circumstances leave no room for joy. But history rarely works that way. People laugh during hard times. They sing when tired. They celebrate small victories. They create traditions wherever they settle. Researchers continue to examine how pioneer children experience these journeys, especially whether their childhood should be remembered mainly as periods of hardship or as times of unusual freedom and responsibility. Personal accounts often reveal both sides. Children carried heavy duties, but they also explored environments that many modern children rarely experience. The evening arrives, the fire glows, the children become quieter. Sleep begins to pull them away from conversation. One child curls beneath a blanket holding the wooden toy. Another rests near a sibling. The wagon becomes peaceful again. You listen to the sounds surrounding you. A soft cough, a whispered good night, the gentle crackle of burning wood, the wind moving across the prairie. The wagon does not feel empty. It feels full of memories being created, full of lessons being learned, full of small moments that would later become family stories. Years from now, these children might remember the cold, they might remember the difficult days, but they may also remember the warmth of being surrounded by family, the sound of laughter inside a canvas-covered wagon, the feeling of snow beneath their boots, the wonder of looking across a huge winter landscape and knowing there was still so much left to discover. The night grows deeper, the children sleep, the adults continue their quiet preparations. And inside this small moving home that has become a winter shelter, childhood continues. Not exactly the childhood of today, not easier, not simpler, but filled with its own kind of magic. The wagon camp settles into a familiar rhythm as winter continues. At first, every day feels unusual. The cold, the isolation, the endless white landscape, the constant need to prepare, but slowly. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. The family no longer wakes each morning wondering what winter might demand from them. Instead, they wake knowing there will be tasks waiting, there will be firewood to gather, animals to care for, meals to prepare, clothing to repair, and supplies to check. Life becomes a careful pattern. You begin noticing that survival does not depend on one person alone. The wagon may appear to belong to a single family, but everyone inside it contributes to keeping the little world functioning. The father may handle heavier repairs and outdoor work. The mother may organize food, clothing, and household routines. The children may gather fuel, assist younger siblings, and help with countless small responsibilities. Yet these roles are not as simple as they might appear. Everyone adapts, everyone learns, everyone fills whatever need appears. The frontier does not care about neat categories. A person who spends the morning fixing a wagon wheel might spend the afternoon preparing a meal. Someone who teaches reading might later help carry firewood. A child learning arithmetic might also know exactly how to recognize animal tracks. The skills needed for survival overlap constantly. You watch the family begin another morning. The father steps outside before sunrise. He checks the wagon first, the wheels, the wooden frame, the canvas, the ropes. Even when the wagon is not traveling, it still requires attention, A winter camp is not a permanent home. It is a temporary answer to a difficult question. How do you create stability while living in motion? The answer comes through routine. The mother begins preparing breakfast. The children organize their tasks. The camp slowly wakes. Nobody announces the beginning of the day. It simply happens. You notice how much invisible work keeps everything moving. There is the cleaning of cooking tools, the sorting of supplies, the drying of damp clothing, the checking of stored food, the repair of small problems before they become larger ones. Modern life often hides these tasks behind machines and services. A broken item can be replaced quickly. Food can be purchased within minutes. Warmth arrives with the turn of a switch. For a pioneer family, every comfort required participation. A warm meal represented planning. A dry blanket represented effort. A repaired coat represented patience. Nothing appeared automatically. A mainstream historical fact is that women on the 19th century frontier often carried enormous responsibilities in managing households, preserving food, making clothing, caring for children, and contributing directly to family survival. Their labour was essential to the success of many emigrant and settler communities. Even though historical records often focused more heavily on male activities, you watch the mother repair a worn piece of clothing. Her hands move confidently. She does not rush. The repair must last. A weak stitch today could become a serious problem during a colder night. Beside her, another family member sorts supplies. The conversation is casual. They discuss ordinary things, what food remains, how long the wood might last, whether the weather seems likely to change. These conversations may sound simple, but they are the foundation of decision-making. A family cannot survive winter by ignoring small details. The father returns with a piece of equipment needing attention. A strap has loosened. A tool requires sharpening. Everyone looks over the problem together. This is another important part of frontier life. Solutions were often shared. Knowledge belonged to whoever had experience. A person who knew how to repair one thing might teach someone else. Skills travelled from person to person, just like families travelled across the land. One unusual frontier practice involved some families keeping small household journals where they recorded weather patterns, supply usage, and important events. These were not always formal diaries. Sometimes they were simple notes written wherever space was available. They helped families remember what worked and what did not during uncertain conditions. You imagine those pages. Small handwriting, dates carefully recorded, a note about a heavy snow, a note about a successful repair, a note about a child learning a new skill, ordinary moments preserved because someone understood they mattered. By afternoon, the family gathers around another task, food preparation. Winter requires careful planning. A meal is never just a meal, it is part of a larger calculation. How much can be used today? How much must be saved? What ingredients are becoming limited? What can be replaced if supplies run low? You watch as everyone contributes. Someone prepares ingredients. Someone tends the fire, someone cleans afterward. The process becomes almost musical. Small movements, repeated actions, a familiar rhythm. There is comfort in knowing what comes next. Outside, the landscape remains enormous. The wagon camp feels tiny against the horizon, yet inside this small shelter, there is organization, there is cooperation, there is life. Scholars continue to explore how much independence and flexibility existed within pioneer families compared with more traditional household structures of the same period. Some researchers emphasize strict divisions of labor, while others highlight how frontier conditions often required people to cross expected boundaries and learn many different skills. The reality was probably constantly changing. A family facing a broken wagon or sudden weather challenge could not stop to discuss who was supposed to handle a task. The task simply needed to be done. As evening approaches, the family gathers near the fire. The day's work is complete, not because everything is finished forever. Nothing is ever finished forever on the frontier, but because today's needs have been met. That is enough. Someone tells a story, someone laughs, someone shares a memory from the journey. The children listen quietly. These moments are important. They remind everyone that they are not just surviving, they are living. You look around the wagon. The same walls that held supplies now hold conversations. The same space that carried possessions now carries relationships. The wagon has become a reflection of the people inside it. Tired, weathered, adaptable, still standing. The night grows colder. The family prepares for sleep. Blankets are arranged. The fire is checked. Tomorrow's tasks are considered. Then the wagon becomes quiet. You hear the familiar sounds again. The wind outside, the gentle movement of the canvas, the soft creak of wood adjusting to the temperature, the breathing of a family resting after another demanding day. The frontier often appears in stories as a place of individual courage, but here, inside this small winter wagon, you see another truth. Endurance is usually built together. One person gathers wood, another prepares food, another repairs clothing, another offers encouragement when the days feel long. A family survives because every small effort joins with another. The snow continues falling outside. The prairie sleeps, and inside the covered wagon, this little household remains warm enough, prepared enough, and connected enough to welcome another winter morning. Section 10. The morning begins with the animals, before breakfast, before conversation, before anyone thinks about their own comfort. The oxen and horses are waiting outside, and the family knows that their needs cannot be ignored simply because the wagon is resting. You step out into the cold air and immediately feel how different the world becomes beyond the warmth of the canvas. The snow is firm beneath your boots. The sky is pale. The animals stand quietly, their breath rising in slow clouds. They do not understand the destination. They do not know why the family crossed hundreds of miles. They only know the routines: food, water, rest, movement, care, and in many ways, these routines connect humans and animals more deeply than words ever could. You walk toward the oxen. Their size is impressive. They are powerful creatures, built for patience rather than speed, unlike horses, which can appear restless and eager. Oxen move with a steady determination. They pull because they are asked to pull slowly, reliably, one careful step after another. The success of a wagon journey often depended on these animals. A wagon could be beautifully packed. A family could be well prepared. But without healthy animals, progress could stop completely. A mainstream historical fact is that many emigrants travelling west relied primarily on oxen because they were strong, durable, and generally more affordable than horses. Oxen could pull heavy loads across difficult terrain and survive on rough grasses that were available along many routes. You watch the father check the animals carefully. He examines their legs. He looks at their hooves. He checks the condition of the harness. Nothing is overlooked. A small injury could become a serious problem if ignored. The animals are not treated as simple equipment. They are partners in survival. The family understands this. The children know the animals by name. They recognize their personalities. One ox may be calmer, another may be stubborn. One horse may become nervous during storms, another may stand patiently while children brush its coat. These relationships grow through daily interaction. You notice how the children speak softly around the animals, not because the animals understand every word, but because gentleness has become part of the routine. Caring for animals teaches patience. It teaches responsibility. It teaches that survival depends on respecting the creatures sharing the journey. The wagon camp is quiet except for these morning activities: a brush moving through hair, a bucket being placed on the ground, leather straps being adjusted. The sounds are simple, yet they form the soundtrack of frontier life. Later, when the weather improves slightly, the family uses the animals for a small task. The wagon itself needs to be moved a short distance, not toward a new destination, just enough to improve its position. Perhaps the original spot has become too muddy. Perhaps the wind direction has changed. Perhaps the family discovered a better place for shelter. The oxen step forward. The wagon wheels begin turning, even after weeks of rest. The familiar sounds return: wood against earth, leather tightening, the slow rhythm of movement. You feel the ground shift beneath your feet. The wagon was designed to travel. Even small movements remind everyone of its original purpose. A curious detail from some frontier accounts is that travellers sometimes decorated or marked their wagons with personal symbols, initials, or small carvings. These markings could help identify a wagon among many others, and also gave families a sense of ownership over a vehicle that carried their entire world. You imagine dozens of wagons travelling together. From a distance, they might appear identical, but each one contains different stories, different hopes, different memories. The animals know this better than anyone. They have walked beside families through heat, rain, dust, and cold. They have crossed rivers. They have climbed hills. They have rested beneath unfamiliar skies. Their journey is part of the family story too, after the small wagon adjustment. The animals are rewarded with care. The family provides food. The children offer gentle attention. The work continues. No one expects gratitude in return. The relationship itself is the reward. Inside the wagon later, you hear conversations about the animals. Should one be given extra rest? Is there enough feed? Does the harness need repair? These discussions reveal how central animals are to daily decisions. A family cannot plan only around people. The animals shape the schedule. The animals influence the future. The weather also affects them. Cold temperatures create additional challenges. Water sources may freeze. Feed may become harder to find. Animals require more energy to maintain warmth. The family must think ahead. A person can put on another layer of clothing. An animal cannot explain exactly what it needs. The responsibility falls on those caring for them. Historians still discuss how pioneer travellers balance practical dependence on animals with emotional attachment to them. Some records describe animals mainly as essential resources, while other accounts reveal strong bonds between families and the creatures that shared their hardships. The truth likely existed somewhere between necessity and affection. People can rely on an animal for survival and still care deeply about it. The afternoon becomes calmer. The children spend time near the animals. They observe. They learn. They begin understanding the small signals: a change in posture, a restless movement, a different sound. Frontier knowledge was often learned through watching. Books could explain many things. Experience explained the rest. As the sun lowers, the animals settle near the camp. The horses shift quietly. The oxen rest. The family completes evening tasks. The fire begins glowing. The smell of dinner returns. Another day ends. You look back at the wagon. It seems impossible that such a simple structure could carry so much responsibility. Yet the wagon and animals together created a moving household. Neither could succeed alone. The wagon needed strength to travel. The animals needed care to continue. The family existed between them, maintaining the connection. Night arrives. The prairie darkens. The animals become quiet. The wind moves gently through the trees. Inside the wagon, blankets are arranged and conversations become softer. You hear someone mention the animals before sleep. a reminder to check them again in the morning, a small concern, a simple act of care. Then silence returns. Outside, the oxen rest beneath the stars. They have carried heavy loads. They have walked difficult paths. They have stood patiently through storms. Tomorrow they will rise again. The wagon will move again. The journey will continue. But tonight, everyone rests together. Family, shelter, and the animals who made the impossible journey possible. The winter camp grows larger in your imagination as the days pass. At first, the wagons seemed like isolated little islands scattered across a frozen landscape. Each family had its own shelter, its own supplies, its own worries, but slowly, almost naturally, those separate islands begin to connect. A wagon arrives from farther along the trail. Another family appears from the direction of a distant valley. A traveller carrying news stops beside the fire. The quiet prairie becomes a place of conversation. A temporary neighbourhood forms beneath the winter sky. You notice that people who might never have met under ordinary circumstances now share something important. They're all travelling through uncertainty. They all understand the sound of a wagon wheel struggling through difficult ground. They all know the feeling of checking supplies and wondering whether they will last. They all know the strange mixture of excitement and fear that comes with building a future somewhere unfamiliar. Hardship has a way of introducing people. A neighbouring family arrives one afternoon with a wagon that clearly needs attention. The wheel has suffered damage from rough terrain. Nobody asks whether helping is convenient. The question is simply what needs to be done. Tools appear. Advice is offered. Several people gather around the problem. You watch as the repair begins. One person knows how to shape wood. Another understands iron fittings. Someone else has experience with the exact type of damage. The repair becomes a group effort. This is one of the quiet strengths of frontier communities. Knowledge travels. Skills are shared. A person's experience becomes valuable to everyone nearby. A mainstream historical fact is that wagon trains often relied on cooperation among travellers because long journeys through remote areas required shared knowledge, assistance with repairs, and mutual support during emergencies. Although families travelled with their own belongings and goals, many depended on temporary communities along the trail. You look around the camp and see how quickly strangers become familiar faces. A person who was unknown yesterday may be the person helping repair your wagon tomorrow. A family you met briefly may share a meal during a difficult week. The trail creates connections that would have been unlikely back home. Of course, not every interaction is easy. Different families bring different expectations, different habits, different beliefs. Living closely with others can create tension. A person who enjoys quiet may struggle beside someone who loves conversation. A family that carefully saves every scrap may disagree with another family that prefers using supplies more freely. The winter camp is a small lesson in patience. Everyone is learning how to live together without losing themselves. You notice that evenings often become the most social time during daylight. Everyone is busy. There's work to complete. Animals require attention. Meals must be prepared. Repairs cannot wait. But after sunset, when the fires glow and the temperature drops, people gather, stories travel from wagon to wagon. Someone shares news from a settlement farther east. Someone describes a beautiful landscape they passed weeks earlier. Someone tells a funny story about a mistake made during the journey. Laughter rises into the cold air. For a moment, the winter feels less severe. A quirky tidbit from some emigrant communities is that travellers sometimes exchange small handmade items during stops, including carved objects, simple crafts, or pieces of food. These exchanges were not always about necessity. They were small reminders that friendship and generosity mattered even when possessions were limited. You imagine a person trading a carved wooden figure for a recipe, a family sharing extra bread with someone who had a difficult week, a child receiving a small handmade toy from a new friend. Tiny gestures become memorable. They are proof that kindness does not require abundance. One evening, a newcomer arrives carrying a letter. The entire camp becomes curious. Letters were precious. They connected people to places far away. A single page could carry news from relatives, updates about old neighbours, or information about opportunities ahead. The letter is read aloud. Everyone listens. Even those who are not directly connected to the message understand the importance of hearing another voice from home. Distance was one of the hardest parts of frontier life. Modern communication allows people to reach across continents instantly. For these travellers, a letter might represent months of waiting. The paper itself became a treasured object. The handwriting of someone far away carried emotional weight. As the winter continues, the camp develops routines. People know who has useful skills. They know who tells the best stories. They know who can repair a broken tool. They know which family has children who enjoy playing together. A small society appears. It is temporary, but it is real. Researchers continue to examine how much cooperation existed among travellers on Western migration routes, compared with competition over limited resources. Some accounts describe remarkable generosity between strangers, while others reveal disagreements caused by stress, shortages, and uncertainty. Human communities have always contained both kindness and conflict. The frontier was no exception. You watch two travellers discuss a difficult decision. A route ahead may be dangerous. One person believes waiting is safer. Another believes moving forward is necessary. They speak seriously. Neither wants to risk their family. Eventually, they agree to gather more information before deciding. It is a small moment, but it reflects something important. Life on the trail required listening. Nobody had all the answers. The land was too unpredictable. The weather was too powerful. The future was too uncertain. People survived partly because they understood the value of shared experience. Later that night, you sit near the fire with families from several different wagons. The conversation moves slowly. Someone talks about a home they left behind. Someone else describes the land they hope to claim. Another person wonders what the coming spring will bring. These dreams are different, yet they share a common thread. Everyone is searching for something, a better opportunity, a safer place, a new beginning. The fire crackles, smoke drifts upward, the stars shine above the camp. You realize that this winter gathering is more than a collection of wagons. It is a moment of connection in the middle of a vast landscape. People who began as strangers now share memories. They have endured weather together. They have solved problems together. They have laughed together. The trail has created a community where none existed before. Eventually, the camp becomes quiet. People return to their wagons. The fires burn lower, the animals rest. The prairie grows still. You climb beneath the blankets and listen. The sounds are familiar now. The canvas shifting, the wooden frame creaking, the distant movement of other wagons nearby. A few weeks earlier, this silence would have felt lonely. Now it feels peaceful, because you know there are others nearby, other families, other stories, other people watching the same stars. The winter remains difficult. The journey remains uncertain, but the travellers are no longer facing it alone, and sometimes on a long road through a cold and unfamiliar world. Companionship is one of the greatest comforts a person can carry. The winter camp slowly becomes quieter as the days pass, but the world around the wagon never truly becomes empty. Even when the trail rests beneath snow, the landscape carries countless stories. The family notices that they are not travelling through an untouched wilderness. The land already holds the history of many peoples who have lived, moved, traded, and built communities across these regions for generations. As you look beyond the wagon camp, you begin to understand something important. The frontier was never simply a blank space waiting for newcomers. It was a place filled with existing lives, existing traditions, existing connections to the land. The prairie, forests, rivers, and mountains were already part of someone else's home. You stand beside the wagon and watch the horizon. The snow stretches outward, covering the ground in a smooth layer. It is easy to imagine the landscape as silent, but silence does not mean emptiness. A place can be quiet while holding thousands of stories. The family travelling west encounters many different communities along the journey. Some meetings are brief, a passing exchange, a moment near a river, a conversation beside a trail. Other encounters become more meaningful through trade, assistance, or shared knowledge. The frontier was shaped by many different groups interacting with one another. Indigenous peoples had lived across North America for thousands of years before large numbers of European American settlers moved westward. Their societies included diverse languages, cultures, governments, and traditions, and their relationships with migrating settlers varied greatly depending on location and circumstance. You notice that the travellers sometimes depend on knowledge they did not create themselves, understanding local landscapes, recognizing seasonal changes, knowing where certain resources could be found. This knowledge existed because people had developed deep relationships with these places long before wagon wheels crossed the same ground. The family hears stories around the evening fire. Some travellers speak with curiosity, some speak with uncertainty. Some repeat rumours they have heard from others. You realise that the frontier was not only a physical journey, it was also a meeting of different experiences and perspectives. People carried their assumptions with them. They carried hopes. They carried fears. They carried ideas about places and people they often knew very little about. The reality was far more complicated than the simple stories often told later. One curious detail from frontier history is that some indigenous groups traded items such as food, tools, clothing materials, and practical knowledge with travellers moving through their territories. These exchanges could involve cooperation and mutual benefit, although they occurred within much larger histories of migration, conflict, negotiation, and changing power relationships. You imagine a meeting beside a trail, a traveller offering an item from the east, another person sharing information about the land ahead, a conversation shaped by necessity, neither side living the same life, neither side seeing the world in exactly the same way. Yet for a brief moment, two different journeys intersect. Inside the wagon, the family discusses what they have seen. The children ask questions. They want to understand who lived here before. How did people travel? How did families survive without wagons, roads, or modern tools? The answers are not simple. The world is larger than one family's experience. A parent explains what they know. Another person adds a different perspective. The conversation continues. This is how knowledge often moved in the 19th century, through stories, through observation, through conversations passed from one person to another. Of course, these interactions were not always peaceful. The arrival of settlers brought enormous changes to indigenous communities. Land use changed. Resources became contested. Government policies often forced native peoples from their traditional territories. The story of westward expansion includes both moments of cooperation and periods of deep injustice. You pause beside the fire, considering how many different lives are connected to the same landscape. The ground beneath the wagon wheels has witnessed countless journeys. Some were chosen, some were forced, some were hopeful, some were painful. History rarely moves in a single direction. It is made of overlapping experiences. Historians still explore how to understand encounters between indigenous communities and emigrant travellers. especially when examining personal accounts written from different perspectives. Some records emphasize trade and assistance, while others reveal tensions, misunderstandings, and the consequences of expanding settlement. The challenge is recognizing that multiple truths can exist at the same time. A person can remember receiving kindness from someone they met on the trail. Another person can remember the same period as a time of disruption and loss. Both memories belong to history. The winter camp continues its routine. Travelers exchange information. Someone describes a difficult crossing. Someone else explains where better grazing might be found when the weather improves. Someone shares a story about a nearby community. The children listen closely. Their understanding of the world grows through these conversations. They are learning geography. They are learning human relationships. They are learning that every place has a story before they arrive. One evening, a traveller brings a small object to show the group. It is a handmade item obtained through trade. The craftsmanship is impressive. The details reveal patience and skill. Everyone gathers around. The object is passed carefully from hand to hand. Nobody treats it as just a possession. It represents a connection, a reminder that cultures meet through ordinary moments as much as through major events. You think about how many small exchanges disappear from written records: a shared meal, a helpful direction, a conversation, a moment of respect. Not every important historical event appears in official documents. Sometimes history lives in memories. Sometimes it survives through stories. The snow continues falling outside the wagon. The family settles into another evening. The fire glows. The wind moves softly across the camp. The children are quieter now. Perhaps they are thinking about the stories they heard. Perhaps they are imagining all the people who walked across this land before them. You look out beyond the canvas cover. The prairie seems endless. Yet it no longer feels empty. It feels full of voices, full of footsteps, full of generations who knew this landscape in different ways. The wagon remains a small shelter beneath the winter sky, but the world beyond it is much larger than the family first imagined. Tomorrow will bring more waiting, more weather, more preparation for the journey ahead. For tonight, though, you rest with a deeper understanding. The frontier was not simply a place people travelled through. It was a place where many histories met, and every wagon that crossed it became part of a much older story already being written. The winter settles deeper around the wagon camp. The days become shorter. The mornings feel slower. The cold seems to arrive earlier each evening, waiting just beyond the edge of the firelight. You begin to notice that the greatest challenges of winter are not always the dramatic ones. There is no single storm that defines the season, no single difficult moment that explains everything. Instead, winter tests people through hundreds of small demands: a cough that lasts longer than expected, a tool that breaks at an inconvenient time, a supply that runs lower than planned, a day when everyone feels tired before the work even begins. Life inside the covered wagon requires constant attention. The family has learned how to manage many difficulties, but uncertainty remains their closest companion. You wake one morning and immediately sense something different. The wagon is unusually quiet. The children are not laughing. The usual morning movement seems slower. Someone has become ill. It begins with something simple: a tired voice, a little discomfort, a person choosing to stay beneath the blankets longer than usual. But in a winter camp, small illnesses deserve attention. There is no nearby doctor's office, no quick journey into town, no easy way to replace supplies. The family must rely on preparation, experience, and whatever knowledge they carry with them. The mother checks the sick person carefully. Warm drinks are prepared, extra blankets are added. The fire is kept steady. Everyone adjusts their routine. A person who normally handles one task may need to rest. Someone else takes over. The family changes its rhythm to support the person who needs help. This is another important part of frontier life. Survival is not only about strength, it is also about care. You sit quietly inside the wagon and notice how much attention is given to the smallest details. A cup of warm water placed within reach, a blanket adjusted when someone becomes uncomfortable, a gentle voice offering reassurance. These moments might never appear in official histories, yet they reveal what daily life truly felt like. A mainstream historical fact is that many 19th century travellers and settlers faced serious health challenges because medical care was limited, especially in remote areas. Families often relied on home remedies, practical knowledge, and assistance from neighbours when professional medical help was unavailable. The family keeps several basic supplies for situations like this: herbs, simple medicines, clean cloth, items collected because they might become useful later. You notice how much knowledge is carried through generations. A parent teaches a child, a neighbour shares advice, a traveller remembers something learned from another community. Medical understanding grows through experience, not perfectly, not without mistakes, but through constant observation. One unusual frontier belief involves some families carrying small protective charms or objects they believe could bring health and good fortune during difficult journeys. These items varied widely, from religious objects to personal keepsakes. Whether people viewed them as practical protection or emotional comfort depended on individual beliefs, but they reveal the human desire for reassurance during uncertain times. You look at the small objects people carry: a wooden carving, a handwritten note, a piece of jewellery, a family keepsake. These items may not change the weather or cure illness, but they remind people who they are. They connect them to loved ones. They provide comfort when circumstances feel beyond control. The days pass slowly while the family waits for improvement. The wagon feels even smaller than usual. When someone is sick, every sound becomes noticeable. The crackle of the fire, the movement of blankets, the quiet conversations. The outside world continues as if nothing has changed. Snow falls, animals need care. The wind moves across the prairie, yet inside the wagon, time feels different. You understand why health was such a serious concern for families travelling through remote areas. A person's condition affected everyone. Restoring one person's strength became the entire family's responsibility. Eventually, the sick family member begins to improve. The change is gradual, a little more energy, a stronger voice, a return to normal conversation. Nobody celebrates loudly. Instead, there is a quiet relief, a smile, a deeper breath, a feeling that the difficult moment has passed. These small victories matter. Winter is made of them. Later, the family gathers around the fire and discusses the future. When should they continue? Are the conditions safe? Do they have enough supplies? Should they wait longer? These decisions carry weight. Leaving too early could be dangerous. Waiting too long could create other problems. The family must balance caution with movement. Researchers continue to examine how frontier families handled illness, especially the relationship between traditional remedies, community support, and emerging medical practices during the 19th century. Personal records show that many households combined practical experience with beliefs inherited from their families and communities. The wagon camp becomes a place of shared knowledge. Someone explains how they treated a similar illness years earlier. Another traveller describes a remedy they learned elsewhere. Someone offers supplies. Someone offers encouragement. No single person has every answer, but together, they create a larger collection of experience. You realize that community matters most when things become difficult. Good weather does not require much cooperation. A warm season does not reveal every weakness. Winter does. The cold shows how connected everyone truly is. A person cannot always carry their own burden alone. Sometimes they need someone else to lift part of it. As evening arrives, the family returns to familiar routines. Dinner is prepared, the fire is maintained, the animals are checked, the wagon is organised, the ordinary returns, and there is something comforting about that. After uncertainty, routine feels like a gift. You sit beneath the canvas roof and listen. The wagon creaks softly. The wind moves outside. The family speaks quietly. The illness that caused worry is now becoming another memory, another story, another reminder of the difficult season they survived. Historians continue to discuss how much resilience among pioneer families came from individual determination compared with shared support from relatives and neighbours. Some accounts highlight personal endurance, while others show that cooperation was often essential for getting through moments of crisis. Perhaps resilience was never only one thing. Perhaps it was a collection of small actions, a meal shared, a blanket offered, a fire maintained, a hand reaching out when someone needed help. The night grows colder. Snow covers the ground around the wagon. The camp becomes quiet. Inside, the family sleeps more peacefully. Not because winter has become easy, it has not, but because they have learned another important lesson. Difficult days come, difficult days pass, and when people care for one another, even the harshest season becomes something they can endure together. The winter inside the covered wagon begins to develop its own quiet traditions. At first, every day was about adjustment, learning where supplies belonged, learning how to protect warmth, learning how to move through a tiny space without constantly bumping into one another. But now, after many weeks beneath the cold sky, the family has created something more than survival. They've created a way of living. The wagon is still small. The weather is still difficult. The future is still uncertain, yet inside this little shelter, there are moments of comfort that have nothing to do with the temperature. You notice this one evening as the fire burns steadily outside. The day's work is finished. The animals have been checked. The supplies have been organised. The repairs have been completed for once. Nobody is rushing. Nobody is solving an immediate problem. The family simply sits together, and that is when the wagon feels most like home. A parent takes out a small instrument, perhaps a harmonica, perhaps a simple fiddle carefully protected through the journey. The object looks ordinary, but when the first notes fill the wagon camp, everyone becomes still. Music carries differently across the winter landscape. The sound moves through cold air. It reaches nearby wagons. It floats between trees for a few minutes. The prairie does not feel so vast. The melody creates a small circle of warmth. You listen as people begin remembering songs from places they left behind. Some songs remind them of childhood. Some remind them of celebrations. Some remind them of people they miss. Music becomes another way of carrying home. A mainstream historical fact is that many 19th century emigrants brought musical instruments and song traditions with them during westward migration. Music provided entertainment, emotional comfort, and a way to preserve cultural memories during long journeys and periods of isolation. You think about the strange power of a song. It requires almost no space. It weighs almost nothing. Yet it can travel thousands of miles inside a person's memory. A family could leave behind a house, a garden, a familiar town, but a melody could cross the continent with them inside the wagon. Storytelling becomes just as important. Someone begins describing a funny event from earlier on the trail. Perhaps the time a traveller accidentally packed a cooking pot inside another container and spent an entire morning searching for it. Perhaps the day someone blamed the wind for moving their belongings, only to discover a curious child had rearranged everything. The stories are not grand historical events. They are everyday moments, but these are the memories people often treasure most. You realize that laughter is a survival tool too, not in the practical sense. It does not repair a wheel. It does not provide food. It does not stop a storm, but it gives people energy to continue. One quirky detail from some frontier communities is that families sometimes created playful winter competitions, such as contests involving storytelling, carving, guessing games, or unusual handmade crafts. These activities help pass long evenings and encourage creativity when outdoor work became limited. You imagine a group of travellers gathered together, someone showing a strangely shaped carving, someone telling a dramatic story that becomes funnier every time it is repeated, someone attempting to imitate the sounds of animals nearby. The entertainment is simple, but simple does not mean unimportant. The family also finds comfort in familiar routines. Special meals may appear when supplies allow. A small celebration might happen for a birthday. A holiday might be remembered even if the surroundings are far from traditional. The decorations may be handmade. The gifts may be tiny. The celebration may last only an evening, but the meaning remains. People carry traditions because traditions remind them that life is more than a series of tasks. You watch the children become excited over small preparations. A piece of cloth becomes decoration. A carefully saved treat becomes something special. A normal evening becomes a memory. This ability to create joy from limited resources is one of the most remarkable qualities of frontier families. They did not wait for perfect conditions before allowing themselves happiness. They found happiness within imperfect conditions. The wagon camp becomes a place where different customs meet. Travellers from different regions bring different recipes, different songs, different stories, different ways of celebrating. The winter pause creates opportunities for these traditions to mix. A person from one area learns a new song. Another person learns a new method for preserving food. Someone discovers a new game. The community grows through exchange. Scholars still debate how much frontier culture was shaped by preserving older traditions versus creating entirely new ones in response to Western conditions. Some historians emphasize the continuation of familiar customs from earlier homes, while others focus on the unique practices that develop through migration and settlement. Perhaps both are true. People rarely leave their past completely behind. They carry pieces of it forward and adapt those pieces to new surroundings. You look around the wagon, the evidence is everywhere. The quilt made from old clothing, the recipe remembered from another place, the song passed from one generation to another, the stories told beside the fire. The frontier does not erase identity. It transforms it. Later in the evening, the family becomes quieter. The excitement of music and conversation fades into gentle reflection. Someone reads from a book. Someone repairs a small item while listening. Someone simply watches the flames. There is a peaceful feeling in these ordinary moments. Nothing dramatic is happening. No great challenge is being overcome. And perhaps that is exactly why the moment feels special. History is often remembered through major events, battles, discoveries, important decisions. But daily life is built from smaller pieces. A warm meal, a shared joke, a familiar song, a story told for the 100th time. These moments create the texture of human experience. Outside, the snow continues covering the prairie. The wagon remains surrounded by cold, yet inside, there is warmth that does not come only from the fire. It comes from connection. It comes from memory. It comes from the simple act of people choosing to create comfort together. You settle beneath the blankets later that night. The sounds around you are familiar now. The soft movement of the canvas, the gentle creaking of wood, the distant sounds of animals resting, the quiet breathing of family members nearby. The wagon is no longer just a shelter against winter. It is a place where stories are being made years later. These families may remember the difficult parts, the cold mornings, the long waiting, the uncertainty. But they may also remember evenings like this, the sound of music beneath a canvas roof, the laughter shared when supplies were limited, the feeling of being surrounded by people who understood exactly what this journey required. The winter remains outside, but inside the wagon, life continues, and for a little while, beneath the stars and the falling snow, the frontier feels almost gentle. The winter seems endless at first. That is one of the strange things about the cold season inside a covered wagon. A single day can feel very long. A week can disappear quickly. Time becomes measured differently, not by appointments, not by crowded schedules, not by the movement of cities. Instead, time is measured by snowfall, by the amount of firewood remaining, by the condition of the animals, by the changing position of the sun, by the quiet signs that spring may eventually arrive. You wake one morning and realize that the family has become very good at waiting. Waiting is not the same as doing nothing. That is an important lesson of winter. Waiting requires preparation. Waiting requires patience. Waiting requires attention. The family continues working every day. The wagon is repaired. Supplies are checked. Food is prepared. Clothing is mended. Animals are cared for. The children continue learning. Life does not stop simply because travel has stopped. You step outside and look across the camp. The wagons sit beneath a pale sky. Snow covers the ground around them. The tracks from previous days have almost disappeared. The landscape looks completely different from when the family first arrived. The prairie that once seemed open and endless now appears quieter, more distant, more mysterious. Winter has changed the personality of the land. You notice that everyone has become skilled at reading small signs, a shift in wind direction, a change in cloud patterns, the behavior of animals, the texture of snow. The family has developed a relationship with the environment. They are constantly observing, constantly learning. A mainstream historical fact is that many pioneers had to carefully plan their movements around seasonal conditions because harsh winters could make trails dangerous or impossible to travel. Reaching a destination before severe weather arrived was often a major concern for emigrant families. You think about the decisions made before the journey began. When should they leave? How quickly should they travel? Where should they stop? Every choice affected the months ahead. A few weeks of delay could change everything. The family cannot simply hurry winter away. They must respect it. Inside the wagon, supplies become a constant subject of conversation. Everyone knows what remains. Everyone understands what is limited. The flour barrel feels lighter. The supply of certain ingredients is smaller. The collection of firewood receives more attention. The family does not panic. They adjust. That may be one of the greatest skills developed during frontier life. Adaptation. When one plan fails, another must appear. When one resource becomes scarce, creativity becomes necessary. You watch the family prepare a meal using ingredients that might seem ordinary today, but here, they represent careful planning. A little extra seasoning feels special. A familiar recipe brings comfort. A warm meal reminds everyone that they are still building a life, not merely passing time. One unusual detail from frontier winter accounts is that some families saved small amounts of luxury items, such as tea, sugar, or spices, specifically for difficult emotional moments rather than daily use. These small comforts could transform an ordinary evening into something memorable. You imagine someone opening a carefully protected container after a particularly difficult week. A little sweetness, a familiar flavor, a reminder of another place. It is not about the object itself. It is about what it represents, a connection, a memory, a moment of relief. The children also begin noticing that winter has its own rhythm. At first, they may have missed travelling, they may have wanted the wagon wheels to turn again, but now they have created new routines. They explore the nearby area, they invent games, they help with chores, they listen to older family members tell stories. The season becomes part of their childhood, not just a difficult period, a chapter filled with its own experiences. You watch them play near the wagon camp, their footprints appear across fresh snow, their voices rise into the cold air. For a moment, the landscape feels less severe. Children have a way of bringing movement into places that seem still. As the weeks pass, the adults begin discussing the future more often. Spring will eventually come, the trail will open, the wagon will move again, but nobody knows exactly when. Weather cannot be negotiated. The ground must become firm enough. The animals must be ready. The supplies must be sufficient. The family must choose the right moment. This waiting creates a special kind of tension. The destination feels close, yet it remains beyond reach. Historians still examine how winter delays affected pioneer families emotionally, especially whether long periods of waiting created frustration or encouraged stronger community bonds. Some personal writings describe loneliness and uncertainty, while others reveal gratitude for rest, reflection, and time spent with family. Perhaps winter created both feelings. A person can be impatient and thankful at the same time. A person can miss movement while appreciating a quiet evening. Human emotions rarely travel in only one direction. One afternoon, a small sign of change appears. The sunlight feels slightly warmer. The snow begins melting at the edges. A drop of water falls from a branch. It is a tiny event, almost nothing. Yet everyone notices. Spring is not here, not yet, but winter has started loosening its grip. The family becomes more active. Tools are checked. The wagon receives extra attention. Supplies are reorganized. The animals are prepared for movement. The long pause is ending. You can feel the energy returning. The wagon that became a home is preparing to become a vehicle again. That transition feels strange. The family has spent so much time arranging life around stillness. Now they must return to motion. The blankets will be packed differently. The cooking supplies will shift. The storage areas will change. The wagon must remember its original purpose. Yet something has changed. The family is not the same as when they arrived. They have learned. They have adapted. They have endured. The winter has left its mark, not only on the wagon, on the people inside it. As evening arrives, everyone gathers one more time beneath the familiar canvas roof. The conversation turns toward the road ahead. There is excitement. There is uncertainty. There is also quiet confidence. They have faced difficult days before. They know the journey will continue to bring challenges. But they also know they can respond. The fire burns softly. The snow outside glows beneath the moonlight. You listen to the wagon settling around you. Soon, the wheels will turn again. Soon, the trail will call. Soon, the family will leave this winter camp behind. But tonight, they remain here, resting, remembering, preparing. The waiting season is almost finished. And beyond the frozen landscape, somewhere beyond the next horizon, the first signs of a new journey are beginning to appear. The first morning of movement arrives quietly. There is no grand announcement, no sudden moment when everyone knows the exact second to begin. Instead, the wagon camp wakes with a different kind of energy. People move with purpose. Blankets are folded. Supplies are gathered. Tools are returned to their places. The sounds that disappeared during winter begin returning. Harnesses being adjusted, wooden wheels being examined. footsteps crossing the frozen ground. The wagon is becoming a travelling home again. You stand beside the familiar wooden frame and notice how much has changed. When the family first arrived, the wagon represented uncertainty. It carried questions. How long would winter last? Would the supplies be enough? Would everyone remain healthy? Now the same wagon carries something different. Experience. The family knows its weaknesses. They know its strengths. They know which items are easy to reach. They know which boards need attention. They know exactly how much effort is required to make this small structure move. The wagon has become a companion, not just an object. The family begins preparing the animals. The oxen seem to sense the change. They stand patiently while the harnesses are placed. The routine returns almost naturally, after months of stillness. Movement feels unfamiliar, yet the animals remember. The first pull is slow. The wheels resist slightly against the ground. Then, gradually, the wagon begins rolling. You hear that sound again. The creaking wood, the turning wheels, the steady footsteps of animals moving forward. It is almost like hearing an old song after many months of silence. The trail ahead is not easy. Spring does not magically transform the frontier into a smooth path. Snow melts into mud. Frozen ground becomes uneven. Streams become swollen with water. The landscape changes from one challenge into another. But the family is ready. They have spent the winter learning patience. Now they must practice movement again. A well-known historical fact is that many emigrant groups planned their westward journeys carefully around seasonal conditions because leaving too early could mean dangerous weather, while leaving too late could create problems reaching their destination before the next winter. Timing was one of the most important decisions for families travelling long distances. You watch the family make those calculations. They are not simply following a road, they are following seasons. The land decides much of the schedule. The family can prepare, they can plan, but they cannot command the weather. As the wagon travels away from the winter camp, you look back. The small collection of wagons becomes smaller in the distance. The place that once felt endless now feels like a chapter that has ended. The trees, the fire sites, the familiar path through the snow, all of it slowly disappears behind you. The children notice the change too. They say goodbye to places where they played. They remember the friends they made. The winter camp was temporary, but it became part of their lives. That is one of the strange qualities of travel. A place can be temporary and still become meaningful. The trail begins asking new questions. The wagon moves carefully through wet ground. Mud collects around the wheels. The animals work harder. Everyone returns to their familiar responsibilities. Someone checks the supplies. Someone watches the weather. Someone keeps an eye on the children. Someone examines the wagon after every difficult stretch. The lessons of winter remain useful. Patience, preparation, cooperation. These skills do not disappear when the snow melts. They travel with the family. A curious detail from some frontier recollections is that travellers sometimes gave names to particularly difficult sections of trails or memorable locations, turning ordinary places into landmarks within their shared stories. These names could come from events, unusual sights, or humorous experiences remembered by those who passed through. You imagine travellers years later describing a place not by official maps, but by memory. The hill where the wagon nearly tipped, the stream where everyone got soaked, the meadow where the children found unusual flowers. Personal experiences shaped how people understood the landscape. The family continues westward. The days become longer, the air becomes softer. Small signs of spring appear. A few green plants push through the soil. Birds return. The world slowly wakes. After months of white landscapes and frozen mornings, these changes feel almost unbelievable. You notice how differently people experience seasons when they depend on nature so closely. A warmer afternoon is not simply pleasant, it is information. It tells the family that travel may become easier. A new plant growth is not just beautiful, it may indicate resources ahead. A clear sky is not merely attractive, it may mean safer travel. Everything communicates. The family reads the environment like a book. Scholars continue to discuss how much frontier travellers relied on formal instructions compared with knowledge gained through experience and local observation. Some researchers emphasize guidebooks and planned routes, while others highlight practical wisdom shared among travellers and communities along the way. The truth likely includes both. A guide could provide information. Experience explained how to use it. As the journey continues, repairs become necessary again. A wagon wheel requires attention. A strap needs replacing. The family stops beside the trail. Nobody considers this unusual. Repairs are part of travelling. The wagon is a machine built from materials that constantly interact with weather and rough terrain. Wood expands, metal changes, rope wears down. Maintenance is simply another part of the journey. You watch the family work together. The same cooperation that carried them through winter now helps them continue forward. The children have changed too. They are more confident. They know the routines. They understand the wagon. They understand the animals. They understand that travel requires effort from everyone. The little ones who once watched adults work now begin offering their own help. Growing up happens quietly, not in one dramatic moment, but through countless small responsibilities. As evening arrives, the wagon stops beneath a new sky. The camp looks different from the winter shelter. There is less urgency, more movement, more possibility. The fire burns, the meal is prepared, the family rests. You sit beneath the familiar canvas roof and realize that the wagon carries more than supplies. It carries memories, the winter nights, the shared meals, the songs, the worries, the laughter. All of it travels forward. The family is not leaving winter behind completely. A part of that season remains with them. It changed how they see themselves. They know now that they can endure difficult conditions. They know that a small shelter can become a home. They know that uncertainty can be faced one day at a time. The wheels continue turning. The trail stretches ahead. There will be more challenges, more decisions, more unfamiliar places. But the family moves forward with a quiet confidence. The wagon rolls beneath the open sky. The animals walk steadily. The wind moves gently across the land. And the journey continues, carrying a family who has discovered that survival is not only about reaching a destination, it is about everything learned along the way. The wagon continues westward beneath a sky that feels larger than ever. The winter camp is now behind you, the frozen mornings, the quiet evenings beside the fire, the weeks spent listening to snow tapping against the canvas roof. All of those moments have become memories carried forward with every turn of the wheels. You notice something different about the family now. They're still the same people who began the journey. They still carry the same hopes. They still dream about the place they're trying to reach. Yet the road has changed them. The covered wagon has carried more than supplies. It has carried lessons. It has carried patience. It has carried the proof that ordinary people can endure extraordinary circumstances. As the wagon moves along the trail, you look back at everything that happened inside that small wooden world. The wagon was never large. It was never comfortable by modern standards. It was never meant to replace a house permanently. But somehow, it became one. Inside those curved canvas walls, families cooked meals, children learned letters, parents told stories, people worried, people laughed, people rested after difficult days. The wagon became a place where life continued despite uncertainty. That may be the most remarkable part of the frontier experience. People didn't wait for perfect conditions before creating a home. They created a home wherever they were. You watch the family stop one evening beside a quiet stretch of land. The sunset spreads across the horizon. The wagon stands nearby, weathered from the journey. The wooden boards carry scratches. The canvas carries repairs. The wheels carry marks from every difficult road. The wagon almost looks like a record of the journey itself. Every mark tells a story: a rough trail, a muddy crossing, a winter storm, a careful repair, a moment when someone decided not to give up. The family gathers around the fire. The conversation turns toward the future. Soon they may reach the place they hope to find. Soon they may build something more permanent: a cabin, a farm, a new community. But nobody forgets the wagon. It was their first home in the unfamiliar landscape. It was the place that protected them when the world outside felt enormous. It was the shelter that held their fears and their dreams together. A mainstream historical fact is that many pioneers who travelled west eventually settled in new communities where they built permanent homes, farms, and businesses. The wagon journey was often only one stage of a much longer process of migration and adaptation. You imagine the family years later. Perhaps they will look at the old wagon frame resting near a barn. Perhaps children and grandchildren will ask about it. Perhaps someone will run a hand across the wood and hear stories about the journey. Memory often attaches itself to objects: a wagon wheel, a quilt, a cooking pot, a small wooden toy. Simple things become valuable because of the experiences connected to them. One unusual frontier custom was the practice of preserving small reminders from important journeys, including pieces of clothing, handwritten notes, or objects associated with significant places. These keepsakes helped families remember their past and explain their experiences to younger generations who had not lived through them. You think about how many memories can fit inside a single object. A repaired blanket is not just fabric. A carved toy is not just wood. A wagon is not just transportation. Each carries a story. The family continues travelling, but the journey has changed meaning. At the beginning, the destination seemed like the most important part. The place ahead, the new opportunity, the imagined future. Now you understand that the journey itself shaped the family just as much. The difficult moments mattered. The quiet moments mattered. The evenings when nothing dramatic happened mattered. History is often built from those ordinary hours. Researchers continue to discuss how pioneer memories were shaped after migration, especially whether later stories emphasized hardship, adventure, or success more strongly than everyday reality. Some scholars suggest that family memories often preserved emotional experiences rather than exact details, while others examine journals and records to understand the practical realities of daily life. Perhaps memory works like the wagon itself. It carries what people believe is important. It keeps certain things safe. It leaves other things behind. You imagine the voices of countless families who travelled similar paths, different names, different destinations, different reasons for leaving home, but many shared experiences: the cold mornings, the careful meals, the endless walking, the moments of wonder beneath a huge sky, the relief of reaching a safe campsite, the comfort of hearing familiar voices after a difficult day. The frontier was not only about movement across land, it was about movement through change. People left one version of life and searched for another. Sometimes they found what they hoped for. Sometimes they found something different, but almost everyone carried the experience forever. The wagon rolls onward. The sound of the wheels becomes familiar again. Creak, turn, creak, turn. The rhythm is almost peaceful. The animals walk steadily. The family moves together. The landscape stretches ahead. You feel the quiet strength of the people travelling beside you. Not because they were fearless. They were not. They worried. They became tired. They missed familiar places. They faced moments of doubt. But courage is often not the absence of fear. It is continuing while carrying fear with you. The sun begins to lower. The family prepares another evening camp. The same routines return. The fire, the meal, the blankets, the quiet conversations. Yet this time feels different. The journey has become part of who they are. The wagon is no longer only a shelter. It is a symbol of everything they have survived. You sit beneath the canvas roof one final time. You listen to the sounds surrounding you, the soft movement of fabric, the gentle creaking of wood, the distant sounds of animals, the voices of family members nearby. These sounds once represented uncertainty. Now they represent familiarity. The wagon has carried this family through cold seasons and difficult roads. It has carried their belongings, but more importantly, it has carried their story, and somewhere beneath the wide western sky, as the stars appear one by one, the covered wagon rests quietly, a small home, a moving memory, a reminder that even in the harshest seasons, people find ways to create warmth. They find ways to belong. They find ways to continue. The fire burns lower now. The wagon rests beneath a peaceful sky. The road ahead no longer feels urgent. The sounds of the journey soften. The wheels are still. The animals are quiet. The family sleeps. You imagine the covered wagon exactly as it was, standing beneath the stars with its canvas roof gently moving in the night breeze. Inside are blankets, memories, and the quiet breathing of people who have travelled far. The cold air surrounds the wagon, but warmth remains within. Not only the warmth of the fire, the warmth of companionship, the warmth of shared stories, the warmth created when people care for one another through uncertain times. The prairie stretches endlessly around you. The horizon fades into darkness. The stars shine above the quiet landscape, just as they did for those families many generations ago. Their journey was difficult. Their days required patience. Their nights required courage. But they also found moments of beauty, a song beside the fire, a child's laughter inside a crowded wagon, a warm meal after a long day, a familiar voice during a lonely evening. These small moments became the treasures they carried, and now, as the night grows deeper, you can let the wagon become still, let the wheels rest, let the wind slow, let the distant sounds fade gently away. The family is safe. The fire glows softly. The covered wagon remains beneath the endless sky, and the story settles into silence. The journey is complete. The memories remain. The night is calm. Sleep now. Beneath the imagined stars of the frontier, where the old wagon rests quietly and the world grows peaceful. End of script.